This show is a part of the FM Podcast Network, the home of great music podcasts. Visit us at fmpods.com.
You are listening to the Dylantantes podcast.
Hello and welcome to Dylantantes and another segment of What Is It About Bob Dylan? I'm Erin Callahan and I'm sitting here with the esteemed Harold Lepidus. Harold is the author of Friends and Other Strangers, Bob Dylan Examined, a panelist at the World of Dylan in 2019 where he talked about Bob Dylan, Street Legal, and the Ghost of Elvis, and an invited guest at the pre-grand opening ceremonies at the Bob Dylan Center in 2022, and he also hosts the Boston Herald podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for agreeing to do this. This is fantastic. All right, so we always start with the question, what is it about Bob Dylan?
Ooh. Well, for me, it's one of the, like Bob Dylan himself, who can name the multitudes. There are many aspects, but the basic thing, aside from the listening to his music and feeling it, is that it helps me think differently, as the ad goes. He made so many artistic left turns that even I joined in late, but it's like, why are you doing this? and eventually it all made sense, or enough, or at least made me question everything, including Bob Dylan, as well as the world and everything, the news, everything. And it continues to happen, and I still get, not sidetracked, whatever. But like when I heard Murder Most Foul, I didn't go, wow, I get this. It's the type of thing where it just took a while, and I was patient, and eventually it made more and more sense, and now I think it's brilliant.
And I think that there are a few things. I think that's such a fitting tribute, that he encourages you to see the world through a different lens, and so how beautiful. But also that you have to be patient with Dylan, and that was such a lovely point to make, that you don't get everything right away, and you're not supposed to. I mean, we're in 60 odd years into his career, and we're still debating certain aspects of it. So I love that. And I just want to say, if you hear any background noise, we are currently at the World of Dylan 2023, and there are people outside this room, so apologies for the distractions. So in that vein, I was going to ask, what was your entry point to Dylan, or how did you come to Dylan? And then that follow-up, because you're a writer, and how did seeing Dylan through, or seeing the world through a different lens because of Dylan, how did that influence your own writing? So how did you come in, and then how does it help you do what you do?
Do you want the long answer or the really long answer?
I want whatever you want to share.
Okay. Well, I was, So, like when I was 5 years old is when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. I didn't see them, but I became a Beatles fan. Mm-hmm. And then the Monkees and the Beatles and everything. And then 1969, I got a transistor radio, and it opened an entire world. And I got $1 a week allowance, and I would buy 45s, and got a grown-up record player. It was everything from like the Temptations and Sly and the Family Stone to Johnny Cash to Glenn Campbell to Honky Tonk Women to Plastic Ono Band. It's like whatever I liked. I mean, and it opened up the world, and it's one of those things that made me very happy in the world. And then there are two people I didn't get, icons: Elvis Presley with In the Ghetto, and Bob Dylan with Lay Lady Lay. I mean, I'd see it somehow, must have seen Elvis in Jailhouse Rock or something, and now you're In the Ghetto, and it's like, what is this? And Lay Lady Lay, and you look at the cover of Blonde on Blonde, and it's like, what is this? Although I'll give my sister credit, she's 2.5 years younger, but she bought the Lay Lady Lay single. She's the first person in the house of two to ever buy a Bob Dylan record for themselves. But I had a friend, Danny, who I'd known since like what we would call preschool, or nursery school, or whatever they used to call he had we were next door neighbors, then we moved a little bit apart, different towns, but we stayed in touch. And he had, his family had an au pair. And when the au pair left and went back to England, she left her mono copy of Bringing It All Back Home. And my friend Danny said, "This is great." He loved it. And I would look at it and I just looked at it. It's like, I don't get it. Like the Beatles, to me, like before the Beatles, and after the Beatles. Like the Beatles were everything. They were the, and the Monkees were pretty close. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't gonna like it. I mean, I knew it was important, but I didn't get it. I didn't know exactly. You didn't know why. You have long straight hair down. You don't have curly hair up. Even though I used to have curly hair up. So he kept on going at it, and then when I was 13, he convinced his parents to get me Greatest Hits Volume 2 on vinyl. And it was after the concert for Bangladesh, so I really wanted to learn about this guy, because I remember the day after the concert for Bangladesh, in the paper it had a big picture of Bob with two Beatles on either side. I mean, George calls them the economy class Beatles. And it's like Bob was the news. It's like one Bob is worth more than two Beatles. So getting more and more excited. And so I remember I put the record on, and side one was like a Beatles record. It was like 4 voices, 4 types of music. And it was a superficial thing, but I was like, well, he's cool. I don't know if I get it. But and that happened, and I just kept on buying whatever came out. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, and that Dylan album with Lily of the West. And my friend Danny, we went, like, for instance, in '72 for my birthday, you saw Grand Funk. My father brought me and Danny. When I went to see Emerson, Lake and Palmer the next December, I brought Danny. So when I saw a big full-page ad in the Sunday New York Times Arts and Leisure section, very minimalist. It just said Bob Dylan / the band, and it was mostly white in the bottom. It said 2 days at the Nassau Coliseum. I'm from New York, and 3 in Madison Square Garden. And I said, I can't possibly ask for tickets because I don't even know if I like them. Not that I didn't like them. I didn't get them certainly, right. And it wasn't like a Beatle or something. And it was a mail order lottery thing, and it was and then Danny's friend's sister somehow had an extra ticket, and he said, can my friend Harold have it? And it's like, and I was so excited, and then I got Planet Waves before the show, and it just completely blew my mind, as I used to say, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and you could hardly see it. We're on the other end of the Nassau Coliseum. And I felt actually unworthy of going because I didn't know enough. And my friend, he went. There was my friend Danny, his friend Steve Kessler, and his older sister Sharon, who was in the front seat. And they're talking about things like Great White Wonder, and I don't know what they're talking about, and they're saying, I hope he does Rainy Day Women, and it's like, well, I don't know about that, but I know that there's that song called Everybody Must Get Stoned. I hope he does that. I knew nothing. Right. And I may have not even heard Like a Rolling Stone before the show. Mm-hmm. And everything was just so cool. Like, they came out and it was very subversive. They came out and tuned their guitars. There was they had like a lamp and a couch. Like I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer had a drum that went in the air and turned around. Mm-hmm. And they tuned their guitars. My memory is that the guitars are much more loud and crackling than any recording I've heard, and it could just be my imagination. But they did Most Likely You'll Go Your Way, I'll Go Mine, which I read about. I hadn't heard it before. Mm-hmm. And then he did Lay Lady Lay, really fast and loud, and it's like it was like this is it. It's a Come to Bob moment. And it kept on getting better and better. And then the band came on. I mean, they were backing Dylan. Mm-hmm. They did their set, and actually, I didn't know till the Sunday before the show when I was listening to a radio program that they did The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Like, I thought it was a John Baez song. I mean, it was right. A John Baez song, but I didn't know. I looked at my single. It's like, oh, J.R. Robertson must be R for Robin. And they had a unique sound, and I bought Moondog Matinee because I don't know if I would like them because they seemed like they were time travelers from the Civil War, and it's like, and I couldn't believe that a synthesizer. It seemed like sacrilege. I mean, how they have such a modern instrument? And so they were great. They started off with Stage Fright, which it's supposedly not about Dylan, but Dylan hadn't toured for 8 years, and so they're doing Stage Fright, which I only seen the album cover Stage Fright, so I knew it was the song, and it was like there's all this mythical stuff that I don't know if anyone has this anymore, but rock stars and musicians, they were just more mysterious back then.
But there's also like that, what you're kind of describing is that religious experience that people are spiritual, connection that we have in that moment. It's what Paul Williams explains about that ephemeral moment with Dylan. And I think a lot of us who love him have had that experience of, in my youth, I used to be like, it's like going to big church.
Right.
That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, because I remember growing up, I mean, I would say that first happened to me with the Beatles, is like you're looking around in those days, and people still had like crew cuts, and it's just like, it was just, everything seemed like black and white and cold, and it was, post-Kennedy and all that sort of stuff. And the Beatles come around, and it's like, youth and vitality and fun, and like I remember I loved the Beatles before I had the record. Well, the only thing they could do is let me down. You know what I mean? I already loved them.
Right.
What did they sound like? And then
no pressure.
No pressure. And then getting back to the Dylan thing a bit, and then he did the acoustic set with just a guitar. There's a real acoustic guitar, not the ones they have now where they plug in.
Right.
And he was doing those songs really fast, and I basically like guitar, bass, rock and roll, occasional acoustic, occasional piano, sitars for the Beatles. But that opened that whole genre too, in a way that just like the whole, that doesn't open the world as a whole other kind of genre within popular music, and led me to here talking to you right now.
What a great experience. And how has it influenced your writing? Your relationship, your fandom, your experiences with Dylan?
Well, what I wanted to do ever since I do have a degree in journalism and Bachelor of Arts degree, and but when I wanted, I read a lot of stuff. It's Cream magazine, and my father used to bring Cream magazine, Circus, Hit Parader, Crawdaddy, every month or whatever, and I read whatever I thought that was interesting, and so that's my literary references. And
those are great.
And but when I started writing, and found my voice, I realized I didn't really want to be negative. I didn't want to be particularly fanboyish either, but it's like, as I'm understanding things and like you get a new Dylan album or other people, it's like, what is he doing? What does this mean? Why, if I want to explore it and share it, and what happens now, usually thanks to all these circumstances, often they'll let me have access to an album 2 weeks before it comes out, and that's all I listen to whenever I have a chance for 2 weeks, and I have to figure out and come up with what. There's an embargo, so you can't till Friday, whatever, at midnight.
Right.
You can't post it, so whatever I'm doing is going to be my opinion. No one can say, well, you read it there and you stole that idea. So I try to come up with something unique, and it's like anything. It's like, and the pressure's on, and it's a privilege, and I don't know if people are particularly waiting for it, but hopefully when they read it, they're not disappointed. And I, like for instance, on when Rough and Rowdy Ways came out, or before it came out, I'm listening to all the songs, trying to figure it out, and there was a song, my own version of you, and she just put her hand on her heart.
There's no video with this, but I put my hand on my chest like, oh, love that song.
And then when it just hit me, like he's everything I'm saying is my opinion. I don't know what Bob thinks. I don't want to say that, he never answers my phone calls.
Who would presume to know what Bob thinks, right?
So, and I thought, like, well, he's talking about his own artistic process.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard other people say it here, and I'm not saying people got it from me.
Maybe they did.
Maybe they did, and that's not what I'm saying, because, but I am saying that no one said it before me. Like, I can prove, and I take pride in whenever I come up with any of those ideas like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not, I'm not very good at hanging up pictures on a wall, but I can, I don't vacuum enough, but I can certainly listen to Bob Dylan and think about it over years and years and years of practice, and come up with hopefully something.
That's one of the things, and I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things I love about Dylan studies is that, by and large, we all want to just have a conversation and suss this stuff out. And, we did on our panel that we just had, but we're all very positive and supportive of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think when we question each other, it's not questioning in an aggressive way.
Mm-hmm.
We're questioning because it's sort of like, oh, that's an interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you took that approach, that you don't want to be negative and you don't want to be very fanboyish.
Right.
Because that comes off as disingenuous. And I've always enjoyed everything I've read of yours. And I'm not saying that to be fangirlish. I'm not standing on you, but I definitely, I think you have an interesting perspective, and there's just, you give us a lovely space for those opinions, so I appreciate that.
I try to make it's like this is what I think. That's all it is. It's
right.
Like, I think this, and people come from different angles. They have different perspectives, and they have different prejudices and everything. And like I talked about Dylan and the Dead album here at the center, and because there's so many people that hate that whole thing, and you can hate it all you want. It's like to say that it's a mistake. It's funny because Bruce Springsteen said, Bob Dylan, open your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, not completely. Or in some cases, and it's like it's like, open your mind. It's almost like if Bob Dylan, it's like, this is awful, I'm going to figure it out.
Right. Don't criticize what you can't understand.
Did you just think of that?
No. I'm not going to Young Winter that. You might have to edit that out. But no,
But he's not on Rolling Stone anymore.
No, he's not. But all right, so I want to, because I'll just sit here and listen to you talk, but I want to, there are things that I want to know. So the list of people you've interviewed is impressive. And so what was your favorite interview and why? And then how do you decide who you're going to interview? That's a lot of questions all at once.
Well, if I look confused, you can say, and what was that other part? So the way I will answer that, these aren't particularly Dylan-related interviews, but there are basically two. They're people that I know or kind of know, either in real life or virtually, or and then there's just like the promo person, set something up, and it's a cold interview, and the person doesn't know who you are, and when it's over, and you'll never hear from them again. Right. But these two interviews that I'm thinking of changed the trajectory of my life to a certain extent. I became a fan of Robin Hitchcock in 1980. I read about him in Trouser Press. I went to England in 1981. It's the only gig he did in that era, and it blew me away. Similarly, not as much as the Dylan and the Band thing, but I saw everybody I saw the Clash and the Jam and Elvis Costello, but the Soft Boys.
That's amazing.
Well, when you're older, as you mentioned, almost everybody was older than younger than the Traveling Wilburys in Europe.
No, they're younger than everybody, I think, almost in that room, except for Roy Orbison. And even some folks were older than Roy Orbison at 52. Okay, Harold's pointing to himself.
I'm older. Last night at did you go to that Robbie Folks?
I didn't.
So at one point he did a song from Street Legal, and he said, "What year did it come out?" And the guy behind me is going 1977. I'm going 1978, and he goes, "Thank you, old white guy over 60 or something."
Thank you, stereotypical Dylan fan. But we're trying to broaden and diversify.
Right. I finally get somewhere, and it's like I'm being marginalized.
Oh.
Not really. I'm just kidding.
All right. Robin Hitchcock was one of your favorite.
So it took me almost literally 33 in the third years to get an interview from that show. And he knew who I was, but he didn't know who I was. So we did the interview, so we got to know each other. Then I went to see him and his current wife. I think they weren't, I didn't know, and I didn't even know they were an item. It was the opening act. And so I contacted him.
Emma Swift.
Yeah. So I contacted him as like, oh, I'd like to interview her, and I'm seeing you tomorrow night. Let's try to figure this out. And because a lot of modern music I cannot, I don't get it. But she was very traditional, and so she started singing the song "Bittersweet." And I thought, it's a good song, and she's an unknown. She needs my help. I didn't know anything about it until by the time the interview happened. Obviously, there were a couple, but I didn't know that when I started.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, and so I interviewed her, and that led to something, to a dialogue between us, and then Robin Hitchcock, for whatever reason, was in Somerville on March 3rd, 2017, which was his 64th birthday, and Al Cooper lives in the area. And I contacted Al Cooper, and I said, and they played together briefly at Newport. It's like, I just said, he's playing in Somerville. And he said, well, let me know when soundcheck is. And I let Robin know. And he didn't even think, he just wanted to be on the guest list. You mean he wants to play? And so, so the whole thing, it's like, I will never top this musically. So
that's awesome. It's one of those moments.
Yeah, I was sitting there the whole time of the marathon, because not only was it amazing, but the music was amazing. So he did 3 songs. He did a half hour of Blonde on Blonde with Al Cooper on organ, and Emma came out and sang one of the songs, Vision of Johanna, which is his favorite song, Just Like a Woman, and they did Said-Eyed Lady, and
my goodness.
So it was. I haven't really spoken to him about it, and I don't know all the details about how it all went down or whatever, but it was like, that cause if I didn't interview him, he wouldn't have known who I was. I wouldn't have gone and seen them, and I wouldn't have contacted Al Cooper, and none of that would happen. So that's something that, and we are whenever I don't want to go too much about him, but he will always say hello to me, and like blah blah blah. I don't want to embarrass him. He's British, But and the other one was a cold interview setup, which is Jorma Kaukonen of Jefferson Airplane and Hot Tuna. Hot Tuna was like my band in the mid '70s, my sort of secret band that no one really understood. I would go see them at the Comac, Long Island. It changed its name every year. Went to that show. I went 3 in the afternoon to stand in line. It was general admission. All these older hippies around, and watched him play guitar, and at that point they were a really loud rock band. They were like 10-15 minute solos, and I was just totally into it. And then so there was we were trying to get this interview going, and then it's like canceled and moved, and then it's like, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's tomorrow, and then at 6, and I already have another one scheduled at 7. So I did this interview, and I purposely did not ask him about Woodstock, Altamont, Monterey, Janis Joplin, or Jerry Garcia, which is, and I talked about what he was up to, what I knew, and you can tell, because he always, I see his interviews, and it's always like, he gets the same answers. I want to get something that adds to the dialogue. And at the end, he's saying he has a fur peace ranch in Ohio where he gives lessons and stuff. He says, if you're ever here, I will give you a tour. And at the end, he says, I'm playing in Boston. I want you to be my guest. And it's like, so that, and then that, but besides that, I mean, I don't know how I'm coming across here, but what it led to was me, like, I don't have all his albums. I only had a hand. I have some of his albums, but I'm getting the quadraphonic version of this, and I'm getting the if I had it on CD, I got it on vinyl. I'm getting right. So I've got the last missing piece. I just got it. It was like something that was only on CD for a while, and I had it on vinyl, but a bonus track. So I listened to that over and over again, and I've seen him a bunch of times. Went to Carnegie Hall for the Hot Tuna concert. Larry Campbell and Teresa were there. So it's that, it's anything that brightens your life like that.
It's worth talking about.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. It's weird.
We got sidetracked.
Yeah, it's weird talking about myself. But anyway, so those are I had a ton of interviews with people, but if I start going on and on, I'll leave people out and I'll feel badly.
All right, so those are the top two.
Those are the two that changed my life and how I perceive music and so on. So
that's great. All right, so who's someone you haven't interviewed that you would like to, and why that person? And I assumed it would be Dylan, and Harold shot back in the interview, would I want to, or in our emails, would I want to interview Dylan? And so, talk to me about that a little bit.
I mean, if his office called me, like let's say I put up something about this sender and not the center, the switchyard, right? And the conference, and Jeff Rosen or whoever contacts me and said, Bob would really like to do an interview. That's Bob talking. But
Bob is Jeff Rosen.
Yeah, there is no Jeff Rosen. Would I turn it down? Absolutely not. But I don't even think it's a possibility. I think also, like Jeff Slate just did an interview. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't ask him, but I have a feeling when he does interviews now, they're all they're not in person.
I feel like he gets the questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
Right.
So and they're brilliantly answered. Again, Bob, if you're there, if you want to interview me, I'm not saying I won't do it, but it's not something that it's something. Not to mention the fact the pressure.
I know that the pressure, and I always think like, what would you ask Bob Dylan?
Right.
And you were just saying about Hot Tuna, like they've heard all the questions,
right.
So they don't want to be asked the same things over and over again. And I'm like, what would I ask? Would I ask like where the best fishing is in Minnesota, or
right.
like what was the best Yankees team?
Right. I know someone who Cindy Bailing's her name. She was a Boston DJ and she's on PBS and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And when I gave a talk about my book, she said she met him at the backstage at a Tom Petty concert at Madison Square Garden, and he asked me, what do you do? So I'm going to DJ, and I believe what he said was, what I miss? Local radio stations.
That's cool.
And it's like, with the individual flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I wouldn't ask him, I don't think I would ask him about him at all. I would just ask him about stuff, not politics.
Right,
just,
no.
And I,
if
you have connections, you can set it up, right?
No, I have no connections. Not even a little bit. But yeah, there's just so is there anyone else that you would like to interview?
Yeah, there's a few, again, not particularly Dylan related. There's Pete Townsend would be one, because I could ask him, he has a memoir and a lot of other things out, and I have plenty of things to ask him about that don't get covered. I think he would open up about that.
Right.
Elvis Costello, I could talk to him about Dylan within reason. Obviously, they protect his privacy. And the other one that comes to mind is David Bromberg, because he tells all these stories, but I don't think people know them. So I don't know. It wouldn't be necessarily new information from David Bromberg, but it'd be new to most people from playing. His old Columbia Records contract was weird, and
right.
Maybe how he didn't feel worthy of going to a John Lennon party.
So just like a different entryway into understanding something about Dylan.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. I dig that. All right, so you have written about tours, and you've written about, obviously, the Dead tour. So what is your favorite Dylan memory or Dylan show, and why? It can be both. It could be either.
No. So, seeing Dylan in the 70s was amazing. I saw that. I saw the Rolling Thunder Review, and I saw him in 78. And so those were, you had to be there, as John Lennon used to say. Mm-hmm. There's a story I told not that long ago, but absolutely the funniest moment I ever saw was Dylan and Petty and the Heartbreakers and the Queens of Rhythm, 1986. I think it's New Haven, Connecticut. It's either New Haven or Hartford. The show I just saw the show at Great Woods in Mansfield, Massachusetts, and then the show is similar. A couple of changes maybe here and there, and in the middle of the encore, Dylan starts playing "Lay Lady Lay," which they clearly had not rehearsed, and it's not a difficult song to play, but it's not a normal chord progression. And Dylan seems to be just facing forward and doesn't care if anyone's joining in or can see what he's doing. So Mike Campbell is trying to watch his hands, holds his guitar up so the rest of the band can see the chords, and he starts, he just does the song, and everyone looks nervous, and the Queens of Rhythm look really nervous, and because not only is he not rehearsing, but he's changing the words on the fly, and it was so exciting because he didn't know what was going to happen next, and it was out of the blue, and it was literally a once in a lifetime thing. And at the end, Dylan just shoved Tom Petty aside, like, "Hi, I played this joke on you," and and it's the type of thing that he could as much as the music, the thing about the Petty Dylan tour is that Dylan was just so funny. He was just doing things that were just kind of telling jokes, or not jokes, but just funny little asides. Not that I particularly saw this show, but I remember he was saying that people tell me, before the acoustic part, you do a solo acoustic part, and he'd say, people say I parody myself. It's like, well, who else am I going to parody? Something like that. Or it's like, people say I can't sing. It's no, I just never learned how to tune my guitar. Just like all these things.
Yeah.
And it was a very lighthearted. You can tell he was starting to enjoy playing live again.
Yeah, that's those are the moments that we need to chronicle. And I'll go back to Paul Williams, who says, like, those moments that when the inevitable and unthinkable, to quote Nina Goss, happens, and he either stops touring or he's going to die.
No.
I know. But it is, and we think about that, and we are the generation that, you more than me, and then there's some folks here who are younger, but we've seen him live, and it's, it is like being in Beethoven's time or watching Shakespeare, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that.
Right.
That we are, sort of as torchbearers to communicate that. We can, and thankfully there are a bunch of people who bootleg, so we can hear those performances, but, we need to kind of make sure people understand those stories. He duck walked once in Houston, and we all lost our minds, and then we were so used to him not talking to us that when he did, we're like, what just happened? And then he was funny, and it was just, so those things those need to be preserved, and I'm glad that we're able to do that. All right, so Dylan, as a writer, so Dylan has often asserted about his songs and about songs in general that they're not meant to be simply read or exclusively read. He said that in his Nobel lecture, and most recently in Philosophy of Modern Song, that great bit about Lenny Bruce. Since you've seen so many live performances and you've written about them, will you share your thoughts on the dynamic between the words and the music in performance?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting, after hearing one of the presentations from Laura Tencher, who doesn't understand why skinny ties are an issue. It's powerful. It's kind of like falling in love or something. It's like, it's a package deal. It's like, you don't say, well, I like this part of this person, and it's like it's the whole deal. You are experiencing something on the stage. Preferably, you can obviously watch a video, but especially in person, it's happening in front of you. And even now, when you kind of know what's happening next, you don't really know what's happening next, and you don't know how he's going to phrase. You don't know if he's going to do something. Is he going to lean against the piano? Is he going to stand up? Is he going to pull out a Grateful Dead song? Is he going to, do something? And but while I'm on that subject, it's like people who talk about it's a static set list. It's like, you know, they want to be the one that sees the Grateful Dead song or whatever, and it's like it's more like a coolness factor than experience what it is. During the early days of the Neverending Tour, it was cheaper. I had people who lived in New York and New Jersey, and I could easily travel. It wouldn't cost a lot of money, and I worked for a record store, so sometimes I get tickets for free, and I could go to a bunch of shows, and they were all different, and that was one thing. Now, usually, if he's in the area, usually it's Boston and Providence. He plays a theater, and I do go to both of them. I hopefully don't sound like a snob, but if I'm not, the last time I was not up in front was when it was at the Gas Arena, and he was with Jack White's other band. I can't remember what they're called. Not the White Stripes, but not Dead Weather. The Rock on Tours. Rock on Tours. There's a podcast called Rock on Tours. Right. But anyway, and people were just talking the whole time.
I was also at a loss.
Right?
People were talking the whole time.
Yeah, and it's just, it's like, I don't know why they went. I mean, I know why they went, but it wasn't for the same reason I went.
Right.
I want to connect with the music.
Right.
And I remember going back to seeing Dylan and the band, we had binoculars, and I did it a couple times just to know what it was like, but I didn't want anything between me and what was going on, even though it was, a football field away or whatever.
Right.
I just want to experience what it is. And, if it's something like, Dylan and the Dead and I got bad seats, I'm just glad I'm inside, or it's outside, but I'm glad I'm inside the gates.
Right.
But these days, if he's in a theater, like I lucked out. And again, I don't know how pretentious I'm saying, but it's like I'm not doing it because I want to be the cool person in the fourth row. It's just like I don't want to be distracted by anybody.
Well, Nina Goss, again, once you were in the first row, it's very much like first class. Once you fly first class, you can't she said, even the second row won't do.
Right.
Like you want to be up front,
right.
And have that experience and have that connection. And that's the thing, is like being in the same space with all the people, and hopefully they're having a similar experience or having some sort of shared experience from that energy, but also with him and watching him do what he does. And does he change phrasing? Does he change lyrics? Like that's, to me, the best part.
I remember him in Avalon, and sweat was dripping down his nose. And it was like, it's not a major statement or anything, but it's like I remember it.
Yeah, of course. It's locked in there.
Or maybe it was tears based on some people's interpretation of what he does on stage.
It could be. All right, so we were on a panel with Court Carney and Jeff Fallis that reconsiders Dylan's work in the 80s in context of his career up to this point. And I won't say his entire career because we want more from him.
Right.
And so without giving too much of our panel discussions away, why should we reconsider and or recontextualize Dylan's work in the 80s?
You could say that about any part of his career too, but as people who, it's one of those things that it does have a bad reputation, or among the uneducated, the unenlightened. It's because there's a lot of good stuff there. Say in the 80s, I worked in a record store and I got all this, ordered CDs, and I started with records and then CDs, and there are all these, you get to hear all this stuff, and the Dylan stuff was still probably the most interesting out of all of it. I'd go home and listen to it over and over again, and it seems like a lot of it just seems also like clickbait too. It's like Down the Groove sucks, read all about it.
Right.
And it's like, and I've been filling in the holes in my collection on vinyl. I've had obviously different formats, and so I bought Down the Groove and I put it on. I hadn't heard it all the way through probably since not that long after it came out. And
it's not one you revisited quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I listened to it, and I thought it was basically, a really good album. I thought it would. I think he purposely did things so it would not do. This is not the first time he's done this, but he could have put Silvio as the opening track,
right?
And it could have. And I think if he made it more like, if he just changed the song order, so it made more thematic flow, it would have been better. But I think they were just out to get him after a while. After Live Aid, all bets were off,
Yeah, of course.
or after the gospel years, whatever. It's like, hey, he's a has-been, as we know,
we were talking about. But you had made the point, which I thought was quite lovely in our panel, that you know what Highway 61 sounds like. You thought about it, and it's something that sort of you've internalized. But you made the point that Down in the Groove is something that you would return to try to figure it out, because there's still questions.
Yeah, I don't know it as well. I mean, when of course I listened to the Cutting Edge thing, the 6 CD version, I listened 3 times in a row, and then I got a copy of the 18 CD thing, and I listened to that once, and then sampled it for a while, and then moved on to the next bootleg series, whatever it was. But yeah, it's like, okay, well, I know Highway 61. If I remember in a car with somebody else, and they had a playlist, and the song Highway 61 came out, it's like, wow, that's awesome, to hear it like as a surprise. But to go over and play it, it's like when there's so many other things to listen to, like Down in the Groove. It's like I bought Down in the Groove, Dylan the Dead on vinyl, Because I've Been to You, and World Gone Wrong all over the last few months.
And you're going to write about them now?
You want me to?
Of course.
Writing about Bob Dylan's a money-losing proposition. I do it for fun. I don't, in case anyone thinks I make any money out of it. Then I come here and spend $1,000 for the privilege of going to the Bob Dylan's.
Agreed.
And I that's fun. No one made me go. I want to go. And none of this is complaining. It's all done lightheartedly, folks.
We signed up for this.
Right. And I'm having a great time, and this is a great way to. This is the last thing we're doing.
Yes, it is.
So I would a lot of times if I'm just sitting at home, and I will have YouTube on my HCTV thing, and I'll go on YouTube and I'll just listen to. There's an outtake from Down in the Groove, which is a version of "God Love If You Want It," which I love. It was supposed to be on there, and then they cut it probably because they wanted them to cut something, so they cut my favorite song. And that there's a 1970 version of "If You See Her Say Hello," which is just could have been on Street Legal.
Right.
I'm drawing a blank now, but stuff. The song "Stop Now." A lot of stuff from that era. Right. I just go to it as a song every once in a while. I mean, it's like but as much as I love vinyl, and I love the ritual and all that, you have to be in the right room and all that. So but I'd rather. But also you have to be in the mood too. I remember when Dylan was touring with Petty and Knocked Out Loaded was coming out, and I wasn't the vinyl those days. CD production was slower, so Knocked Out Loaded came out like the day before I was going to see Tom Petty. So that's why I have to listen to it. Usually I don't listen to anybody I'm going to see because I want it to sound fresh, but you want to know the new album. So I studied as best I could one night, Knocked Out Loaded, and I went to see him, and he didn't do any of the songs on it.
That's awesome.
But I like You Want to Ramble. Everyone talks about Brownsville Girl, and but All Aside too. And even and another thing too is that you look at stuff and then someone made fun of it at the conference. Like They Killed Him, which with the child chorus.
Right. Oh, that was Jim.
Yeah, and which is of course I can't say I had a different opinion when I first heard it, but of course after a while I think of it. It's like, well, are we? And no offense, Jim, but are we so cynical that children singing about Martin Luther King and Jesus Christ is a terrible thing? You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, it's it's not a skinny tie, but it's
that's fair.
I don't go to it, but I wouldn't if I rarely would get up and skip anything on any record ever.
No.
But it's there is, but again, it's that weird Bob zone that you just say, what is going on, and what is it thought again? What is he thinking? What is the thought process? But and I'm not sure where he was in with his family and how old the kids were or whatever. But he's it's his friend Chris Christopherson,
right? And
he's there, and he's singing about heroes with a children's chorus, and it's like, okay, it's not Manchester 66 like a Rolling Stone, but he, as he says, I've already done that.
Right.
And he decided to do it. It's like, okay, well, why? It's like, well, again, when you think about it, it's like, well, it's a very nice thing to do.
There's still value in figuring out what he's trying to maybe do or accomplish as an artist in that period. So I'm going to ask you, so tell us about your book, Friends and Other Strangers, Bob Dylan Examined.
Okay. Well, from 2009 to 2015, I was writing online something called Bob Dylan Examiner, and then it went out of business. So I saved as many of the articles as I could, and a friend of mine was the Doors Examiner, and he had a publisher for his, it wasn't his writings, but about the Doors and other things. His name is Jim Cherry, and I said, do you think they would publish a book on Dylan? And he said, sure. We all worked out. Had to think of a theme, so we thought about, people, so I think it's about 120 people, ranging from musicians to politicians to a kid who got his harmonica from the stage.
That's cool.
And I used to have the time and energy to do all that. So anyway, I compiled that into a book, and it's something that it sold hundreds of copies, which is pretty good considering you can't get it in a store; you have to order it.
Yeah.
And although I'm going to talk to that Magic Eye store.
You should.
Yeah, I gave him my card.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
In the center too. So.
I was going to say put it in the center.
No, I can put it in the center.
Ask them to put it in the center.
Yeah. So, I'll when I get home.
All right. Fair point. So what are you currently working on?
I'm working actually just getting back up to speed. I haven't done the things I've done lately were things that I got to do. I interviewed Dag Brathen, you know who he is? Mm-hmm. He kept on, whenever I needed information, he gave it to me, and I figured before Ray Padgett gets to him, I'm going to interview him.
All right.
And I interviewed the Dylan book, any Dylan album, I write about that, but other than that, I've been kind of taking it easy. I'm trying to, get back on track. I don't say it's not something I do for fun, so I do it when it's fun.
Okay, that's fair. So what other music do you listen to, and how does that music relate to Dylan? And you've talked a little bit about that, but how does it all kind of, if Dylan is maybe a center point, or, how does that all relate to Dylan?
Well, these days, how does it relate to Dylan? Well, Dylan's a pretty high bar. And, and again, when you start listening to the Beatles when you're 5, and my father loved classical music, that sort of, you realize what music can be. Mm-hmm. And but there's for the past 20 years, probably 80% of it has been Beatles related, Dylan related, or Robin Hitchcock related, and then the rest is miscellaneous. Although very, very recently, my son, he signed on to YouTube, something music, and it's like a streaming service, and so what I've been doing is making playlists of stuff that I basically have on singles in the basement.
That's cool. What kind of things?
A lot of them are things that are, I probably shouldn't mention the names, but it's this is things that I probably didn't even get at the time, but now they'd be politically correct. I'm going to put those on the list. I have a playlist of things that are, I listen to my earbuds, and no one knows what I'm doing.
All right.
It's subversive. But I won't tell you they'll cancel me if I give you any titles.
We don't want anyone to cancel you. You're delightful. All right, so this might be my last question because I don't want to run out of time, and I want to have enough time to close it out. But is there any particular Dylan albums that affect you differently over the years, or there's something that you listen to? I will give a quick example. In the fall, when my grandmother was ill and I would drive home the hour from taking care of her to my home, I listened to every version of Not Dark Yet.
Not Dark Yet?
As sort of a catharsis for the anxiety that I felt and whatnot. And it was really, really meaningful. Sometimes I listen to podcasts. I told Rob Kelly yesterday that I did. I mean, and yourself. And so there's just, but that song was really meaningful to me in that emotional moment. And I'm wondering, are there any that you connect with, or any that you look back on now and look differently, sort of like he's looking back at the Mondo Scripto lyrics, as Laura told us? But I would love to know about that.
Well, the thing that comes to mind is something that happened a while ago. I can pretty much pinpoint what made me think I could write about Dylan by revisiting one of his albums, which was Street Legal, which baffled me when it came out. I was not yet 20, and I didn't think it was bad, I just didn't get it. Then in 81, I got the second volume of Michael Gray's Song and Dance Man, and I just found out that they're gonna reissue it as a 3-part thing, the most recent volume, and he said, Street Legal's the second best villanelle in the 70s, and just like he had nice things to say about Self-Portrait, which I just heard was a joke,
Right.
and so he made me open my mind to what things could be. So I used him as a blueprint of what to think about music, and then I came up with my own opinions. Obviously, sometimes I disagree with him, but I always find it, whatever he says sticks in my head, even if I disagree with him. But I would say that the moment I thought that I could do this was when he talked about Street Legal. In the first song, they say, where the stitches are still mending, and the last song says, remind me to show you the scars. And I thought, it's all like a puzzle, and I want to figure out the puzzle.
Oh, that's beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Harold, before we close out?
No. Yes, peace, love. Everyone love each other. That's what George Harrison said. Everyone just be nice to each other.
That is the basic rule in my classroom. I'm like, just be nice.
Yeah.
It's tough enough out there. Can't we just be nice to each other here?
Right, yeah.
I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more at this conference, working with you on the panel, and I'm so grateful that you sat down with me today. I'm going to close out now, so I'll let you have the absolute last word. I'll say goodbye and let Harold say whatever he'd like to say, even if it's be kind again.
Well, I want to thank you, Erin. I won't go through it here, but offline, very, very nice and generous things, and that meant a lot to me and my family, and
it was my pleasure and privilege.
Yeah. So fuck cancer. That's what I say.
I'm gonna high five him on that. All right, we're signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Dylantantes podcast. Be sure to subscribe to have the Dylantantes sent directly to your inbox. And share the Dylantantes on social media.